Remember, the guy came in and he had like this little spray bottle of acid rain. And he was spraying on everybody to promote it. Yeah, that's great. And then the guy was like, refuse.
Spray some acid rain on the kids. Welcome back to Poutine Politics. This is Adam.
This is Mike.
Last week, we talked about climate change solutions. This week, we are going to talk about the conservative climate change plan. The plan that they have titled A Real Plan to Protect Our Environment. For reference, you can find this plan at arealplan.ca. You can download the PDF and you can read through the document. My initial thoughts on this document are it's not enough. It's not bad, but it's not great. I give it a 3.6.
Out of what? 100?
I mean, I was going to be nice and say 10.
I'm giving it 3.6 out of 100.
All right.
This is useless.
Anyways, so what I did was I was reading through it and I kind of went page by page and made some notes, handwritten notes. I'm old school like that. A lot of this is going to sound like criticism. If you're a conservative supporter, again, I don't feel bad because I that's the first thing I'm going to do with anything is I'll see the good in it, but I'm going to criticize the hell out of it as well. And it doesn't matter what party it is. That this is what I do.
I can say that. I look at it how effective a thing is going to be. Is it going to be effective? Like, are you just talking magical, or are you talking actual implementable plan? And there's some things that can be taken that could be good, but I'm looking for them still.
Some of the stuff that I went over, and I'm gonna are gonna seem kind of nitpicky, but I'm okay with that. We start just after the table of contents of this thing with a message from Andrew Scheer. So some of the things that he talks about in this message that I'm already taking issue with, and some people are going to be like, oh, that's a pretty stupid thing to take an issue with. Well, no, it's not. In case you don't live in Canada and are unaware, the Conservative Party, or what used to be called the Progressive Conservative Party, had a major split in the early 90s, where, and as a result, there were multiple parties that formed from that split. So the Progressive Conservatives remained a huge shadow of their former selves. But the Reform Party, the Bloc Québécois, and technically even the Green Party was created as a result of that schism. Some people are like, well, the Green Party is a left-leaning party. And it's like, again, look at their policies again, and you'll see that they're kind of on both sides of the fence. The two right-leaning parties, the Reform, which eventually became the Canadian Alliance, and the Progressive Conservatives did end up joining forces again to become the Conservative Party. The current Conservative Party is treating themselves like they are the old Progressive Conservative Party. And so in the message from Andrew Scheer, he mentions Sir John A. Macdonald, Robert Borden, Diefenbaker, Brian Mulroney, and it's like these are all conservative values. So the problem I have with it is that they're progressive conservative values, but they're not conservative values the way the Conservative Party is now.
No, I, as a longtime conservative person who grew up with Mulroney, I look at the Conservative Party now and I'm like, you're not doing the things that a conservative person would do. Like, you're doing things that are opposite and counterintuitive. A conservative platform would be, we want to reduce spending. We don't want to put as much money in social programs. I'm fine with that. But give tax breaks to wealthy? No, that's not how that works. And to take money away from education and research? No, conservatives are the ones that want to do that because they know that's where the money goes. That's how you get more money.
Yeah, exactly. A well-educated population leads to increases in GDP, which leads to an increase in government revenues, which leads to surpluses, maybe paying off the debt, items of that nature. So again, very nitpicky point, but I feel like it's still kind of a point nonetheless. The plan says that the carbon tax gives big polluters a pass, but then further on down the document, it does mention that emitters currently pay a carbon tax on emissions above 50 kilotons. So which is it? Do they get a pass or do they pay a carbon tax once they emit beyond a certain amount? And that's 50 kilotons per year. I will admit the average, the individual is paying a large percentage of the current carbon tax. But what this document neglects to mention, because we obviously don't want to make the other party look good, is the fact that a lot of the carbon tax that is being paid by the individuals is being refunded to the individuals by way of a tax credit on their tax return. And again, some people will argue and say, well, why it's a redistribution of wealth, or it's why bother taking the money from the individuals if you're just going to give it back to them anyways? And you know what? If a $300 credit is a redistribution of wealth, we're not very wealthy. The average person with driving, let's say a standard sedan, let's say something like a Camry or something of that nature. If they're driving, the 20 to 25,000 kilometers a year that the average driver would drive, or what they're paying in carbon tax by putting fuel into their car right now, at least in 2019 in Ontario, maybe tops out at $100. If that person is a single individual, no kids, no spouse, and lives in the GTA, their carbon tax credit's $150 on their tax return. Now, there's some extra. There could be some extra carbon tax they would pay. Let's say if they heat their house with natural gas, that carbon tax is relatively low. It's 3.1 cents per cubic meter. So you gotta do the measurement on it. But when you add those two things together, that single individual is either breaking even on the carbon tax, maybe paying a little bit more than what they get back, or paying a little bit less than what they get back. So again, to the average single individual, it's probably not going to cost them anything.
Yeah, and not to get too dull in the weeds, if people know that it's going to cost more to do a certain thing, they might look at other ways to reduce that cost, and they might look at ways of reducing their carbon footprint, which is what the goal of the carbon tax is. You have to understand the merit behind the carbon tax in order to find out how it can benefit people.
The document talks a lot about costs to families and individuals, and again, it never mentions the fact that most will receive back more than their cost. I can point to that and say, okay, well, that's the liberal propaganda of it, saying, well, people are going to get more money than what they pay into the carbon tax, and that's in kind of the liberal documentation of the carbon tax, and I'm pointing out the fact that there are people that will get more back in carbon tax than what they pay. Some people point, oh, well, the cost of groceries are going to get more expensive. You know what? The cost of groceries were probably going to get more expensive regardless of if there was a carbon tax or not.
Well, and the other thing about it is that a carbon tax doesn't necessarily have to. Like, if you look at the example for Australia, their economy didn't collapse. Their economy didn't go in a recession. It got stronger. The idea that a carbon tax is going to drastically increase pricing, or these fear-mongering tactics that it's just the world's coming to an end because, and like, you're going to lose all these jobs, things like that, it doesn't occur. It doesn't. The numbers, the experiments, the different countries that have implemented this have seen no difference. So it doesn't, they're not applicable because it's a goal to go towards, and yes, it does impact the economy, but it's not this drastic in price. You won't notice it. They don't notice the difference.
I'll point to BC, which has had a carbon tax since I believe 2007. Go look at the economy for BC. They show a graph and it shows China being the top emitter, which we know this. Nobody's going to deny that China emits a lot of carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide equivalents, carbon emissions. So that's fine. I understand. China's got to reduce their emissions too. I'm not going to get into how I feel about that, why the emissions are as high as they are. I mean, they have a large population, but it's a lot more than that. The chart does show that China's emissions have also leveled off over the last number of years. So you can kind of look at that and say, yeah, they still emit a lot of CO2, a lot of carbon emissions, but they are doing something about it.
I find it interesting that they level it off in 2016 when China started implementing other things to reduce them.
Yep.
Because they're going down now, not up.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then it goes on to mention that Canada emits roughly 1.6% of global emissions, which, yes, okay, again, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't sound like a lot. But when you compare that to the fact that Canada is roughly 0.5% of the population, we're swinging above our weight.
Mm-hmm.
Compare China's emissions, percentage of global emissions, to its percentage of the population, and you'll see that per capita, Canada does emit a larger amount per person than China does. Some people say that's not a fair assessment. Whatever. Either way, whatever assessment you want to use, every country that emits carbon emissions needs to reduce them.
That's right.
So the first main section of the document is called Green Technology, Not Taxes. And so they talk some fancy buzzwords like green investment standards, green investment standards certification, and they give some examples of what those green investments are. So what the conservative policy involves, they're not calling it a carbon tax, but it kind of still is a carbon tax in a sense, except the money doesn't go to the government. So in this section, they talk about that they're trying to target businesses more than individuals. Okay, so and what they've also said is that they're lowering the standard, or maybe it's increasing the standard for when those businesses would start paying the carbon tax. So right now, large emitters start paying the federal carbon tax above 50 kilotons of CO2 and CO2 equivalent per year. The conservative plan wants to take that number from 50 down to 40. So the idea being that it's a lower amount of emissions to start paying into essentially this quote unquote tax, because again, they're not calling it a tax because the revenue is not going to the government. So what you're supposed to do is these large emitters, once they go over the 40 kilotons, they're supposed to take money from their own pockets and they're supposed to invest it in some sort of maybe a company that is inventing green technology, invest it into green bonds, which will allow companies that are trying to do research and development or trying to implement green technologies, that they'll have somewhere that they'll be able to borrow funds from, maybe like as a pool to make their products, to do the prototyping, to expand, to release. The idea is that if you're a polluter, you have to invest in something that's going to improve green technology. And that something has to be certified by, I don't know, government auditors to say that it is a qualified green investment initiative.
So they're making a solution that creates more red tape. So that's how they're going to fund it.
Yes.
They're going to make, rather than having it a tax because everyone doesn't like the word tax, they're going to call it whatever. So that maybe they'll call it a fee. So rather than calling it a tax, they're going to say, okay, well, you have to fund this. And rather than reallocating the resources, which is simple and straightforward, they're going to say, well, we're going to reallocate the resources from these people that are going to be hit the exact same way. You're not, just because you're saying it's not a tax, they're still paying the same price.
I'm going to give you one better. One of the examples they give in the document about a green investment is investing money in a subsidiary or a division of a Canadian company that does eligible research to green technology. So technically, a company like Suncor, they could create a whole bunch of these subsidiary companies, and when they go over that 40 kiloton limit, they could start taking money from the Suncor, say, parent company and invest it into these their own subsidiaries. And as long as they've received certification for the research that they're doing, the research into green technology, carbon capture and sequestration, as long as they get certified by the government that what they're doing is an eligible investment, they can move that money into the company. The way I'm reading the document, or at least there's not, maybe it's just a problem of not enough information to be able to fit into a document like this. It doesn't say that the investment into this eligible research has to actually result in a finished product. So what it becomes is an expense that the company can use to reduce its taxes.
Yeah. So it's either A, they're going to pay it anyway, or B, they're not actually going to pay it. It may result in some greener technology breakthroughs,
but there's no guarantee.
There's no guarantee, and the incentive isn't to find ways to reduce their carbon footprint. It's find ways to reduce their tax implications.
I'm not trying to sound cynical, but I mean,
why wouldn't you?
And like you said, well, right, exactly. Why wouldn't I? And like you said, like adding this layer of certification and government oversight process, you're right. It adds red tape. I thought the Conservatives were like lower government regulation and smaller government kind of party, kind of like the Republicans say they are in the United States, but obviously aren't.
I don't understand. I don't get that. Like, why are you adding red tape? This is you're so if you're trying to get them to reduce and to get technology, fine. But rather than using the government as a lever and a mechanism to make sure the money is spent a certain way, you're going to allow the company to figure out where they're going to spend it, and you expect the company to be, not try to go after their bottom line. The company's going after the bottom line.
Yeah.
The government is in place so that way companies can't cheat the system, or not. I shouldn't say cheat the system. Are going to do what's in the best interest of the country, right? So the government of Canada wants to do what's in the best interest of the country. The business, whichever one it is, like the coal-fired plant, is in the best interest of the coal-fired plant.
Yeah.
They're going to do whatever makes the most money for them. So whatever they can do to get around that, and you're just going to create extra layers of people that have to go in and figure this stuff out. Like, that hurts.
Okay. So that's the green investment standards that they want to introduce. Green Homes tax credit will be a 20% refundable credit on expenses over $1,000 up to a maximum of $20,000 for improvements to your house to make the carbon footprint of your house less. So, adding more insulation to your attic, or installing a high efficiency furnace or air conditioner, putting solar panels on your roof. Items like that, it's a tax credit. They want to introduce it as a tax credit that you can apply for on your tax return. I'm okay with this one.
I'm not.
But not like in love with this one. So it's because it's another one of those what feels like boutique tax credits, because there's really only a certain subsection of the population that is going to be eligible to utilize this credit.
It's a tax credit for the rich.
Right.
That's all it is. It's not a tax credit for the average person. The average person can't afford it.
Now, here's the part of it that I don't like. Apparently they're only going to have it last for 2 years. So all of these improvements and upgrades that have to be done within 2 years.
So it's even more of a tax credit for the rich, because the rich can do this within 2 years. People that don't have a wealth of money just to sitting around, they can't do that.
Right.
It's a complete tax credit for the rich, and it's also a gloss over statement. Oh, well, look what we tried to do. You didn't try to do anything. You just wanted to make it look good.
Yeah. So in the document, they estimate that this credit would cost the government roughly $900 million a year, give or take, but that's their estimate. So again, if it being a two-year plan, let's say $1.8 to $2 billion in government costs. So based on how much credit you're eligible for and what you have to spend to receive that credit, I figured the math out that the minimum investment from individuals would have to be at least $4.7 billion in improvements per year on at least 237,000 households in a year. And not everybody that would utilize this credit is going to get the maximum credit, because, maybe you can only afford to do so much. Like, I know when I had my furnace and air conditioner installed a few years ago and had all the duct work done, that was pretty close to about $10,000 for us to do it, between the install, the materials, and obviously the appliances. That was like the major expense that we did for that year. So doing that work would only get me a credit of roughly $1,800 based on the math for this tax credit. Which, whatever, I mean, $1,800 on a $10,000 cost, at least it helps. But just think how much more stuff I'd have to do to qualify for the full credit. If you don't, and you have to outlay that money first, because you don't get the tax credit until you file your tax return.
Right. That's what I mean. Like, if you're not a person that has, 6 months, 1 year's worth of money sitting around for yourself, you're not going to be able to do this. It's just not going to work. So it's going to be for the wealthy.
Right.
And if the wealthy need a bigger tax credit, for what reason?
Yeah.
Right? Like, the ability to read between the lines when I see policies coming out and what they actually mean, not what they say they're going to mean, is important. And it's something that politicians use. Oh, well, we're trying to do this. I'm like, yeah, but nobody's going to be able to do that, right? Like, so you have to know where to target your politicians and challenge them on it. Say, listen, this isn't going to benefit me. This is a terrible tax credit. This is not going to work. you're going to reduce this how? So when you go to the voting polls and you see, oh, well, they're trying to do something green, are they really? Or are they trying to give tax credits?
Yeah.
And if they're giving tax credits to wealthy, that means they're not giving them to you
Yeah.
if you're not wealthy.
Green patent credit. This is a problem that I have with language from any party. There was a big uproar a few years ago in regards to potential changes to the small business tax rate. A lot of people got up in arms. Oh, you're going to increase the small business tax rate and we're going to pay more taxes. It's a problem with language, okay? So the green patent credit mentions that it would reduce the business tax rate from 15% to 5% on income generated from green technology. You have to understand what the government means by small or by business tax rate or small business tax rate. They are only talking about corporations. This doesn't affect someone who runs their business as a sole proprietorship, okay, or as a partnership. This is a tax credit for corporations, big and small. It's all about language, and I wish government in general was more specific with this language because people end up getting upset about something that has no effect on them. I've said before that the government has a revenue problem. So the downside to reducing taxes is, okay, so the government's going to bring in less revenue. How are they going to make up for the fact that they're going to bring in less revenue because of this tax cut? I'm all for innovation in green technology. I'm all for innovation in pretty much any technology. But what does the government do to make up for the fact that in these situations it's going to make less revenue? It either has to make more revenue somewhere else or it has to cut somewhere else. And there's really no discussion in this document at all about cuts.
No.
Green Tech Innovation Fund. So this is the Conservatives are going to leverage private capital. So the government puts in roughly $250 million into this fund, provided that from like venture capitalists or whatever, they receive 4 times that money from private money, and it's a fund that I guess people that are developing green technology could borrow from to R&D, adoption of new technologies, starting to sell it, and the idea is that the people that invest into that fund would then get paid back by the people that borrow the money from the fund with inherent gains. Again, it's something that while having the money available is good, and it could certainly benefit the businesses that are developing the qualified technologies. I'd be worried that it would end up benefiting the investors more than it would benefit the businesses that are creating the technologies.
Yeah, because it's all about, it's just another tax haven.
Right.
That's all it is.
Yeah, it is another way for people that have lots of money to be able to invest, and businesses to be able to invest into something that is, hopefully in their eyes is going to make them money. Which again, I'm not against people making money, but the only businesses that are going to be able to invest in this are businesses that already have millions of dollars.
Right. Like it's a tax haven. I don't have any problems with people trying to grow money through investments, but call it what it is.
Right. It's a growth stock, or growth bond, I guess. Supporting agriculture. So again, that's a really small section, but the problem I have with the supporting agriculture is that it talks about the fact that the carbon tax has created an increased cost on agriculture. Never mind the fact that there are forms that farmers can fill out and provide to their vendors that they buy their fuel or their natural gas from. It's a form that they can provide to those vendors so that they're exempt from the fuel or from the carbon tax from the fuel they're buying.
He's leveraging his attitude is that he's going to make them pay. Like his other solution, the 40 kilotons, the carbon. What is he calling it? The carbon.
It's not. I don't think it really has a name per se.
No,
They're calling it. No, there isn't a name to it. Green investment standards. I guess that's the name that's on the document.
So Andrew Scheer's carbon tax. I'm just going to call it that. I really hope the other parties do the exact same, because that's what it is. I mean, you're just not calling it tax because it doesn't go to the government, but you're forcing people to invest. How is that not a tax? You're just cutting out the government allocation aspect of it. Fine. Your tax is still a tax. Like, you're still making people pay money for it. So you're doing nothing. You're still charging those people. Like, if they go over a certain amount, they're still getting hit in their wallet. And if they're not getting hit in their wallet and they're able to relocate the funds and still make money off of it through investments, then you've done nothing.
Well, I guess if they make money off of it, then technically the government could recoup tax money in that sense, right? Like if the investment is profitable, then the government's going to make some tax money off of that. But there's not, and it could obviously it could be that this is not legislation. This is a platform document. So you can't put in all the specifics to say that the investment has to be legitimate or has to show that there's a reasonable expectation of profit or something of that nature, right? Like again, the investments technically could go into businesses that are just constantly doing research and development and are designed to lose money.
Yeah, but he's got a tax. He's just relabeling it as tax.
Greening the grid, so improving the electrical grid in remote communities. So again, that could be a good thing. That could go back to like what we've talked about in regards to wind turbines or solar panels. Just doing something where in these remote communities where they're still using diesel generators.
Yeah.
Right. So again, that's a good thing. This is why I'm saying that it's not. This isn't a terrible document. It's just that there are parts of it that are you have to scratch your head about. So this is one of those things that I'm like, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. But then the improvements to the electrical grid is good. They talk about nuclear energy and kind of mention the fact that there's newer technologies that nuclear as it is technically a green or a clean energy solution. The concern obviously people have is the waste that it generates. Well, we're still using very old nuclear technology, and the technologies that have been developed even in the last 20, 30 years are so much cleaner than what we currently use, at the Bruce plant and the Darlington plant, and at other nuclear plants around the world. And nobody wants to spend the money to build these cleaner technologies because there's enough people out there that are anti-nuclear and feel like, well, it's really not going to be cleaner. It's not going to produce less waste, and we have a problem with the waste as it is already. It's not the solution, but it's part of the solution. Anyway, so they talk about nuclear energy and improving the grid, but then talk about, we're going to do what we can to make sure that the cost of electricity doesn't go up.
They can do that. Like they can do it with the solar panels and solar energy. Like those are solutions that can reduce the cost. It's just, are they actually willing to do it? Because I don't think they are. Because coal, if they continue on with coal, your prices are going to go up. The reality is, if you continue with coal-fired plant, your price of energy will go up. It's just we are using more and more electricity in the households all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're more dependent on electricity every day. And as a result, the price is going to go up unless you find something that's cheaper. Like and people are going to have to make a choice. Like, do you want that hill with a wind turbine on it, or do you want to pay more per month? Some people in the area will be like, well, I don't want that. Well, you know something? Then pay more per month.
Pay more for hydro.
Like,
pay more for hydro.
You want me to reduce my my bill, and you're going to put a wind turbine in my backyard? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
Yeah, yeah. The people, you know what? The people that get the wind turbines built on their land, they don't have a problem with it because they're getting money every year for having that turbine on their land. It's the people around that don't have the turbines on their land that are looking at, that's an eyesore. Well, get one on your land, and then when you get the check in the mail, you'll realize, oh, this is actually not a bad idea. I think a lot of the people that complain about turbines would change their tune if the checks that are handed to the people that actually have the turbines on their property were going to those people instead. If they were receiving money, they'd be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, put a turbine on my property. That's okay.
I don't get the wind turbine argument. I never have. Like, it's no different than power lines.
Wind turbines cause cancer.
Is that an actual thing?
Trump said that at a rally.
Oh, I don't care about
Trump. No, but it's not an actual thing. I said it as a joke.
I didn't know that there's actually like a push for that.
Oh yeah, and obviously there's people that now believe that wind turbines cause cancer. Anyways.
It's just like fans that they have to. Have you heard about that in Korea?
What's that?
Fans can only run for so long, and they have to have automatically shut off because you don't know about this.
I don't think so.
So in South Korea, manufacturers of fans have to have an automatic shut off after a certain length of time, and I don't know how many hours it is, because they're afraid it's going to use up all the oxygen.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right. As soon as you mentioned the oxygen thing, I'm like, I do remember this. And it's like, who believes that? Who thinks that that's what's going to happen?
It's a law in South Korea. It's not like the manufacturers have to do this.
I mean, I remember I heard about that one. I can't remember how many years ago, but it's like it's just one of those things that you hear it and you think that's stupid, and then you forget about it, right?
Yeah, like you're rolling your eyes at this. Like this is just absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, every once in a while you get these crazy theories, and you're like, oh well, yeah, because the fan is spinning the air, but it's not taking oxygen out of the air. It's just moving it.
I don't even want to dig into it right now. Anyways, wildfire early detections, improving early detection of wildfires. So that's a technological thing, but they're very vague on that one. Obviously, again, great idea. We need earlier detection of wildfires, so because you especially look at the frequency and the size of the wildfires that are burning in this country, and other than the fact that we have winter, feel like they would be burning year round, like in California. Yeah, early detection would be great. I feel like that's one of those departments that's probably underfunded as it is.
Oh, for sure it is.
Whether it's Ministry of the Environment, whether it's Environment and Climate Change Canada, they don't have the budget they need to be able to maintain what they're doing, let alone improve on what they're doing. We're gonna run long.
Yeah,
buckle up. A cleaner and greener natural environment. Strategy for invasive species. Vague.
You have to have one. Like it's nothing new.
Right. Exactly. It is something that successive governments have been talking about over and over and over and over and over
just
again.
Don't do what you don't do what would make logical sense. Ask an expert. Like don't introduce another species to combat another species because you're just going to make that other species just run rampant.
Right. Exactly. We've experienced that how many times now? Like I can't even count anymore. Like remember when it was Asian carp?
Yeah.
They brought in the Asian carp because of was it the zebra mussels? Yeah, that's right. We had the problem with zebra mussels, so they brought in the Asian carp, and now the Asian carp are breeding like crazy, and they're eating all the other fish and stuff like that. And
and they don't even care about the zebra mussels. It's like, well, why would we eat that? This fish is way tastier and easier to
exactly.
get.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and zebra mussels. On a side note here, zebra mussels aren't as bad as what people say they were. Like zebra mussels are a pain in the butt for anyone who has a boat or anybody that swims where there's zebra mussel because it cuts your feet. However, they clean up lakes.
Yes.
Big time.
Yes.
Right? Like I remember swimming in Lake Ontario back in the 80s and you couldn't see anything. And now you go to Lake Ontario and you can actually see down. So, yes, zebra mussels and invasive species, they cause all kinds of problems. Sometimes there are benefits. And the Asian carp was not a solution.
No.
Stop bringing in other species to solve problems. And that's the difference between doing what you think is smart and asking an expert. You always need to ask an expert or several.
Wetlands, so completion of the Canadian wetland inventory. That's a good thing. Knowing where all the wetlands are, that's fine. Again, this is one of those comments that could anger a lot of people. It's like the gun registry.
Oh, do not get me started on the gun registry. I know there's a lot of people there's a lot of very staunch, we'll call them PETA-like people that believe all animals shouldn't be hunted and everything like that. Fine. You're on that extreme. If you want to have wetlands, if you want to have environments for species, let them be hunted, let them be fished, and I can guarantee those people that like to do that will make sure that they're around. You don't let them, and developments will run over them.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what this Canadian wetland inventory is about, which is a program that's already in effect. So they're basically just saying we're going to complete it. So it's like, okay, so carry on what previous governments have been doing. With less wetlands comes more flooding.
Yeah.
And comes a reduction in ecosystem and habitat for animals. So it comes a reduction in the animals that we have around. And obviously then wetlands are a carbon sink. We lose wetlands, we lose that carbon sink. Okay, so that means more carbon emissions in the atmosphere. Protecting waterways. This one led me to some additional research. One of the things that they mention is the dumping of raw sewage. Okay, so dumping of raw sewage into waterways, which is terrible.
Yes.
Okay, I am not going to deny that it's terrible. But the one thing in particular that they mention in this section of the document is about the sewage dump in 2015 by the city of Montreal. This document essentially blames it all on the Liberals. It's a little more involved than that. The dumping of the sewage, it was 8 billion liters of raw sewage into the St. Lawrence waterway. This happened, like I said, late 2015 because there were certain improvements to the sewage and wastewater system that the city of Montreal needed to do, and so in order to do that, they had to purge the sewage and wastewater system. Well, the only way that they can purge it in an effective manner in the time frame that they had to do the improvements is to dump it into the river, which sucks.
And it's all relative. So if you just throw billions and trillions and gazillions and quadrillions and things like that, it's not a relatable number. So how much of an impact did that raw sewage had? How much of an impact will the improvement have? Because they're not the same argument.
Right.
And this is where the details matter.
Here's the details, or some of the details at least, because after it happened, the government did have a commission through the Environment and Climate Change Canada, and there's documents that you can find on the Government of Canada website that goes through essentially kind of from the start to the finish about this whole sewage dump situation. First of all, the city of Montreal had already applied for approval and received authorization to dump the sewage into the St. Lawrence in February of 2015. Who was Prime Minister in February of 2015?
Harper.
You are correct. And what party is Stephen Harper with? Or was with?
Conservative Party.
Right. Okay. So the authorization to dump the sewage happened before the Liberals were elected. The city had also emailed the ministry, so Environment and Climate Change Canada, or as it was called back then, just Environment Canada, in September 2014 and September 2015. Who was Prime Minister in September 2014 and September 2015?
Harper.
And what party was he from?
Conservative.
All right. The city of Montreal claims it did not receive the necessary information from Environment Canada concerning the wastewater system's effluent regulations since 2013. Before the point that they dumped this sewage. Who was Prime Minister in 2013?
Harper.
What party was he from?
Conservative.
The Liberals did pass, I guess, the final authorization for the dumping of the sewage into the St. Lawrence River. But authorization had already been approved by the Conservatives before the election. The reason why the city of Montreal chose not to dump the sewage until November of 2015 was so that it would have the least negative effect on the marine life in the river, because at that time of year, there are less fish and whales and things of that nature in that section of the river.
Yeah, it's a past breeding season and things like that, from what I remember of being an angler myself. Yeah, that makes sense.
You can, I guess, technically blame both parties for the fact that the sewage was dumped, but it's disingenuous to say that it's all the Liberals' fault.
Yep. Which is clearly highlighted, too.
Yes, it's very much highlighted in the document that it's the Liberals that told them they could dump the sewage. No, it's not. The evidence is there that it wasn't just the Liberals. It's just that the Liberals gave the final approval.
Yeah, like many things, it requires 6 approval ratings to get one thing brought through. And often that's the devil in the details, right?
Establish a hunter and angler advisory panel. Lobbyists.
No.
You don't think so?
No, because hunters and anglers, they're not big business.
I guess like the individuals aren't, but there are underlying businesses that could be big business that are involved with hunters and anglers. Like, because technically, hunters and anglers could include companies like fur harvesters in North Bay, or it could include fisheries, and we know that the fisheries are obviously large businesses. Like that's kind of the part where I say that this advisory panel could potentially be lobbyists.
It could be potential lobbyists, but you don't want to exclude them. And the reason why you don't want to exclude them is because that's how the gun registry got passed. Because they didn't include anybody.
Right. Okay.
Like, you have to, if you including them in the advisory panel doesn't mean that they're ones running it. And I don't know the devil's in the details, right?
Right.
So they should be involved, because if you just get some yokel trying to, like a politician whose job it is to make things look good, trying to pass laws that are implemented, like the United States had this law where it says that if a endangered species animal habitat was on your land, you can't use that land or that area around the land, right?
Okay. Yep.
That looks really good. Now, if a farmer finds a bald eagle nesting in his tree and he can't use that land, that bald eagle is going to disappear in a big hurry.
Yeah. before the local authorities find out that it's there.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the problem with not having people that are actually going to be impacted of the rules on an advisory committee. So I agree with it if it's, somebody who's not from Remington.
Right.
checking
Okay.
about-
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want somebody from Remington doing it. You don't want that person there. You want the guy who runs his local fishery, the guy who is in charge of the game wardens. Game wardens are the best.
Yeah.
Those are the guys you want on the advisory committee because they know what's going on.
So I guess my point is that it can be a mixed advisory panel,
Yes.
but I would be concerned that it would become a panel of lobbyists because I point to, and I'm going to bring it up again, the food guide situation where now Andrew Scheer's talking about changing the food guide because he's basically being told by the dairy and the beef lobby that, hey, we're not bad. We need to be added back in there because the Liberals didn't listen to us. Like, no, it's not that the Liberals didn't listen to you. The Liberals might have been the ones that introduced the new Canada food guide, but they're not the ones that created it.
But you don't. I don't think that the dairy farmer should be have anything to do with the food guide.
No.
It should be the doctors,
Dietitians,
people like that.
Yeah.
That you need to be. That those are the people. So when they say hunters and anglers, they're not asking for. They're not trying to get the gun. They're not trying to say the weapons manufacturers,
Right.
or the Bass Pro Shops to come in and
Right.
talk on their behalf.
Right. And so
That's where I want
okay.
to make sure.
So that's where I point to that and say, you know what, as long as it's not dominated by big business,
That's right.
then
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Then that's fine.
That's where
But that's what I'm worried about. Actions on plastics and waste. So document says the Liberals have done nothing on this. Now, I believe this document came out before the announcement of the single-use plastics ban, and then obviously we got the sound clip about the water box bottle drinking type thing, and then the conservative supporters and such that came out and recorded themselves drinking water out of a cardboard box as though that's what he was talking about.
The single-use plastic ban is something that is very effective as far as a political platform. I don't know how useful it was. Right? Like, are you going to tell me that my one straw is breaking the camel's back? Like, it's not. If you look at
Drawdown, yeah.
single-use plastics isn't on there anywhere. Recycling isn't on there. Targeting those kind of plastics isn't the problem with carbon emissions. It's a problem for the environment.
Yes.
But it's not. I don't know how much of a problem it actually is.
Right.
Packaging is way more of a problem than me using my plastic straw.
Well, I think that they're including that in the single-use plastic, though. Like, the problem is like, well, what do you replace it with? I think the idea might be, let's say if you go get a bottle of Coke from the store, right? Right now, comes in a plastic bottle. So the idea is you could replace that and go back to the glass bottles that we used to have in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s or whatever. And what's some companies do like the limited edition release. Hey, look, it's the small Coke bottle. Well, yes, you could release the 591 milliliter version of the Coke in the glass bottle as well. I think that's what they're hoping, but whether that's what happens is another question. So protecting our oceans, this is like the conservative talkback against Bill C-48, where the the BC coastline north of Vancouver Island, the oil tankers above a certain size are no longer allowed in there because of the passing of Bill C-48. The language in this is basically like, we're going to consult the communities and people that live along the coastlines to determine what the best solution is. Sure. Figure out the solution, whatever you think it might be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what my opinion on it is. That's the problem. I felt like Bill C-48 wasn't a big deal. And obviously there's a lot of people out there that are like, it is a big deal. And the problem for me maybe is that because I don't live in BC and I don't live on the coast of BC, that it doesn't affect me. And so I look at it and think, what's the big deal? And there are people that will tell me, well, here's what the big deal is. And if you want to educate me on it and make me have more of an opinion on it, that's fine. But right now it has next to no effect on me. taking the climate change fight global. So this is the last major section of this document. So it talks about utilizing Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So being like, what's that? I had to look it up. And so Article 6 is cooperation between parties. So it's sharing nationally determined contributions towards emission reduction. So essentially, as I understood it from reading it on Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is awesome. And anybody that's like, Wikipedia is not a source, Wikipedia is full of cited sources. So Wikipedia can be used as a source because you can point to the source that they got the information from.
Yeah, even though it can be edited, and there are people out there that intentionally do mischievous things, even though they can edit things like that, if you can go and look at the reference part, because there is a part on the Wikipedia articles that's references, you can use that as a guide to go and verify it.
The way that I read the description of Article 6 kind of loosely makes it sound like a cap and trade system to me. Because the idea is, let's say Canada does something within its, we have a certain mandate that we've put out for the Paris Agreement where we're going to reduce our carbon emissions to 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. The way that I understand Article 6 is that if we do better than that, we can use Article 6 to quote unquote transfer the additional reductions that we've put in place to another country. And so then it's like carbon credits where they can use the credit of the fact that we've done better than we said we were going to do to help out another country or countries that are having troubles meeting their obligations in the Paris Agreement.
Right. Which is helpful.
I point to it and say it seems like cap and trade because, at least based on what happened in Ontario with the cancellation of the cap and trade program that we were in with Quebec and with California, even though the similar political parties have communication with each other, this is kind of one of those situations where one side is saying, no, it's a bad idea, and the other side is saying, well, hold on a second, we could still use it. This still sounds like it could work. And now this is using a framework agreement that was agreed on by 194 nations in the world. So this isn't just a local, Canadian thing. But I don't know. I just we're canceling local cap and trade, but we're saying that global cap and trade is still fine.
Yeah. If you want people to abide by system, you have to lead, right? Like, there are countries out there that have started to have centralized heating systems. That's a fantastic way to reduce cost, a fantastic way to reduce carbon emissions, because an air conditioner, for instance, in your window, as opposed to a geothermal plant in the middle of town, air conditioners are going to use way more.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a geothermal plant in the middle of town, you can just regulate the temperature for everybody and then just charge it, just like they charge with electricity, gas. It's just a commodity. And then it's cheaper. It's cheaper for everybody because rather than spending the electricity, which is air conditioners are terrible in electricity too, you have a geothermal plant. It's cheaper.
Yeah.
So it works out. The problem is the cost up front, and that's the thing. But that's how you can reduce costs as far as things like, and then they're doing it in Denmark, Copenhagen, and places like that.
Well, and you have to think, like, if they weren't doing something like that, the cost to heat, because a large port, let's say a place like, well, Denmark, I guess not so much, but let's say Norway or Sweden or countries that, where a chunk of their population lives above the Arctic Circle, they spend a lot of money on heating. So if you can provide a solution that will, again, there's going to be that immediate upfront cost, but overall, it's going to cost less over time, and it's going to improve the environment.
That's the kind of thing that, and I hope I'm not very likely. I hope that green initiatives are the way that will go. I don't see anything in here saying anything about that.
The last thing I want to cover has to do with exporting liquefied natural gas to help replace coal. I'm positive and negative on this. So I'm positive on it because liquefied natural gas does burn cleaner than coal does and is more energy efficient than coal is. So in the sense of, converting Asian countries from using as much coal as they do for power generation and instead changing to natural gas, I can see where there's at least a reduction in the continued buildup of carbon emissions. But it doesn't stop carbon emissions. It just slows them down.
Trying to reduce all carbon emissions is an unattainable goal, however trying to reduce it any way, shape, or possible is a good idea. And I think the Conservative Party realizes that we have this, we might as well use it and make some money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's push for it. However, you're going to have to get the other countries that you're saying, oh, we're not doing anything, but can you reduce yours? And then we'll sell you the product.
Yeah.
And then to go, yeah, that's fine.
One of the things that I can't remember. I don't remember if it was in the document or if it was just something that, as I was researching other things, I looked up, is the fact that so you got to use tankers, obviously, to get the natural gas from the BC coast over to Asia. A lot of tankers run on bunker fuel. Bunker fuel is extremely dirty. Extremely dirty, like some of the worst fuel in the world. And so I'm like, well, does shipping the natural gas over to, say, China for them to use it, when however many tanker ships are going to have to continuously be bringing the natural gas over to China to make sure that they can keep generating electricity, is it going to be cleaner than just burning the coal? And I couldn't find any language to tell me whether that was the case or not. However, what I did find out was, I think it was 2015, and it seems like it's tied into obviously the whole Paris Agreement situation, but it's like International Marine Organization or something along those lines has put in place, like part of the agreement of businesses and countries that operate in international waters is that they have to either convert their ships from bunker fuel to natural gas or do something to reduce the carbon emissions from the ships by 2020. And then I think there's there's different tiers to it where they have to reduce their emissions by these certain levels, and then the final tier is going to be in place by 2025 with a possible extension to 2028. But the idea being that by 2025, bunker fuel can't be used anymore. The only way that they could potentially ships could potentially continue to use bunker fuel is with exhaust scrubbers for carbon sequestration.
Yeah, you want to make it so costly that they won't want to do it. They want to force their hand.
I'm mixed on this one because I know that liquefied natural gas is cleaner than coal, and yeah, it would make sense that we should try and we need to replace the burning of coal with something. If changing to liquefied natural gas is a step towards something better again, where it's as carbon neutral or zero emissions as possible, I'm okay with the fact that we have to take that step. Because you're not going to go from burning bunker fuel to batteries.
No.
There's a step in between. Yes. So at least we're going to that, and I'm okay with that.
Whichever way would make it cleaner. And I mean, without looking at that document, I don't know how much cleaner it is, but as far as from a Canadian's perspective, we should definitely be willing to do that. We have the pipeline. Let's use it. Let's not expand it, but let's use it.
Yeah.
Right. Like expanding that's not a good strategy. Because liquid natural gas is not a solution; it's a Band-Aid.
Yep.
But we can make money off it, so let's make the money off of it.
Yeah,
until
you don't want to harm the economy with solutions, but I think we have to realize that there's going to be harm that comes out of any change.
I find there's massive holes with Andrew Scheer's carbon tax. I'm calling it like it's Andrew Scheer's carbon tax. He can call it whatever he wants to. The only reason it's not technically a tax is because the government's not involved. But the government is involved because the government may not be collecting the funds, but they're telling them where to put the funds. Okay, what's the difference?
Yes, exactly. They're the ones that are coming up with the certifications. They're the ones that are coming up with the regulations. They're the ones that are coming up with the other tax credits.
And where's that money coming from? That's the other thing too. Like all the stuff that he's trying to implement, that money has to come from somewhere, and he's not getting it from carbon tax.
No.
Where's it coming from?
No, because their plan would be to repeal the carbon tax that was introduced by the Liberals. So
right, but your plan is going to cost more money, and it's going to have the same relative impact.
And that's what economists have said so far about this plan. Again, it's not like 100% of the economists are saying it. So let's put that there at least. But there are economic studies that have already been done on this plan, stating that it's more likely going to cost more money than what the carbon tax will. Again, things are going to cost money, but it should also efficiently cost money. Since it's a policy platform, there's too much information in it that is vague to be able to say, oh, this is exactly how it's going to work.
Oh, and yeah, and I get the idea. Like, I mean, as a person who's putting a policy, it's difficult to put in exacts, and I'm fine with that. I'm not criticizing is that platform from the standpoint of you're not giving me details. That's fine.
Right. This had more details in it than the Ontario PC Party's election platform had in 2018.
Like,
And this is only one leg of their election platform. So this is the positive thing for me, is that I'm actually expecting a platform from the federal Conservatives for the election.
Well, no, what they should do is just 2 months before the election, fire the person in charge, and then replace them with somebody else, and don't come up with a platform. It's perfect. It's genius.
Genius.
It's a fantastic way to get elected. Then they can't challenge you on anything. What are your plans? Well, we're going to work on it.
See, he doesn't have any plans. Well, that's great. That means he's got a wide open mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that worked out well for us.
Yes. This has been the Conservative Climate Change Plan from Poutine Politics. My name's Adam.
My name's Mike.
Have a good day. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Poutine Politics. Be sure to keep up with us online and through social media. Our website is poutinepolitics.ca. You can find us on Facebook at Poutine Politics. You can find us on Instagram at Poutine Politics. You can find us on Twitter at Politics Poutine, because Twitter thought we were French. We're on YouTube, and we've also started a Patreon page at Patreon, patreon.com/Poutine Politics. We hope we've entertained you enough that you can show us some love. We'll be back next week with another episode.